We all know the brain is important. We can't function without it. But a lot of the time we don't realize that what our brain thinks affects our biochemistry and physiology in a major way. And there are now some new technologies that are available that can give some clues to what we're thinking and how we can change that so we can be healthier.
It's amazing. When you get a window into something like the brain, you start to see the whole world of science changing. Everyone's been reading all these articles on the brain lately. Obama's put $16 billion
Wow.
of money in a tight economy into brain research. And there's a good reason for it.
Oh, yeah.
Because all of a sudden we're seeing the more we understand how this works, we understand how this works, how we
Exactly.
perform, how our organs function.
They're inseparable.
They're inseparable.
One affects the other affects it, and you have a nice system here. So the more you understand about that physiology in the whole body, the more you can understand about what you can do about keeping us healthier.
Yeah, and it's common sense. I mean, everybody knows that a positive person seems to navigate better through life, and a negative person seems to have a lot of challenges. So that's maybe the kindergarten level of this.
Sure.
But as we go deeper into the science and understanding of it, we understand that we can start to change the way we think and change the way we feel and even change the way our body heals itself.
You know, we doctors need to spend more time on that. We need to be looking at ways that we can identify that what's happening is a feeling or a thought that's characterizing how our body operates. And when that happens like that, it changes. It's what gives us headaches and backaches and ulcers and cancer and hypertension. I can't think of a disease that's not influenced by that.
When the National Institutes of Health in Washington, D.C. does these million-dollar researches and keep coming up with the conclusion that 70% or more of all disease is related to stress, then we know, we've got to really get a handle around the fact that we have more influence on our health and wellness than we might think.
Exactly. And now we have neuroscience that can tell us about that and can help us regulate it so we're not powerless. We can do something to change how our bodies are working and correct some of those defects that are causing the ulcers and the hypertension and the diabetes and the cancer to develop.
Exactly. When we make the connection with the brain and the body and the thoughts in the brain, we start to look at all the things that are being written now about neuroplasticity, right? Everybody's writing and reading about how our brains are plastic and malleable, and even so much that our brains affect the way our genes express themselves.
Absolutely. The DNA isn't what everybody thinks. And when you use this word neuroplasticity, what you're talking about is the brain's ability to change its pathways, to grow new neurons, new nerve cells that do different things.
And it turns out there's thousands of different neurons. We used to always think there's one or two different kinds of neurons. It turns out there's thousands of neurons, each designed to get functions in the body working properly and wired into the genetic system of our body. And when we say genes, we say, well, what does that mean we're affecting our genes? Well, all the genes are creating the proteins in our body that are everything from our hormones. So if you have a moody day and your hormones are off, well, guess what? Your brain has somehow sent the signal to generate those kind of proteins, or the neurotransmitters, or the cell walls. Proteins are what our body's made of.
Right. You know, this whole idea of epigenetics is coming out now, where it's not the DNA that really is responsible for determining what our health is going to be like. You may be born with a few bad genes that can cause diseases that are terrible, but they're in a small minority, maybe 5%. The other 95% is, what are you exposed to? What do you think? What kinds of feelings are running your life? And those are turning genes on and off like switches, so that they become very powerful ways of determining what our health is going to be like.
And we have absolute influence over that.
Right.
But up to now, there's been a bit of a disconnect, because
how do you measure it?
How do you measure it?
Yeah.
If you can't measure it, then it's a bit conjecture. We know empirically from our experience, right? We know that if I enter into a tense situation in a more calm way, I'm going to have a better chance at navigating through that.
Exactly.
But what we need for the average person is a way, I think, to measure what that is. Just like if you're on a weight program, and the first thing you do when you want to lose weight is you step on a scale and you find out what your baseline is, and you say, okay, I'm about 122 pounds overweight. Now I'm going to take these interventions. I'm going to eat differently. I'm going to exercise. And then each day or each couple of days you go on that scale and you see what the changes are.
All right. So how do you measure these brain changes? You've developed some technologies that tell us how the brain is functioning. And you can measure the different kinds of brain waves, and that gives us clues about what's happening in our physiology.
Yeah, well, ever since I was a teen, I've been very interested in the brain. And when I was a teen, the best you got out of the brain was some really bad medical books and some very basic stuff. And in those ensuing 40-something years, we've watched this amazing change in technology.
Absolutely.
That went from nothing to complex EEG systems to MRIs and fMRIs to what we've discovered now with a headset like this. Look at
That's got to be cheaper than an MRI or a SPECT scan.
A little bit better. So for under $100 now,
that's great.
An average person can have a medical grade EEG sensor. This is the same one that's on the big expensive systems in a hospital. It's Bluetooth connected to an iPad or a computer. And we can read from this point in the forehead brain's output that's about 95% in correlation with the very expensive systems. So all of a sudden, for the first time, an average person can experiment with this. Because I say experiment because it's an engaging process. Brainwave feedback is about looking at the screen, seeing what your brain is outputting, and then changing your thinking.
Yes.
And as you change your thinking, you watch the way your brain changes.
So it changes its electrical activity because of its change in your emotions and your physiology.
Exactly. And it empowers us because we realize we have control over that.
Exactly.
If I ask you to make a fist, you do this.
Yeah.
If I say, bring up your gamma, you say, well,
What's
that's a little too personal.
Well, if you can see it on a biofeedback mechanism, which is what you've created, you can change it. Just by your thinking. It's amazing.
And why would we change it? Well, because we know that gamma is related in many ways to joy and self-esteem and this bigger sense of purpose. We know that delta has a relationship to inner calm. And we think of it as sleep, deep sleep. But guess what? We put out delta waves, low frequency waves during waking state.
Right.
And each of the bandwidths that we identify that is neuroscience bandwidths tell us a little bit of something. So Wujitech, the company that I've developed to do this work, is really cool. We're very simple, and we say we're going to look at joy, we're going to look at inner calm, and we're going to look at attention as the main things to really work on that idea of stress and peak performance.
So you measure this, then you do some interventions to change it. It might be Qigong, it might be meditation, it might be heart math, it could be 1,000 different ways of doing that, and track it over time to see how you're doing.
Right. That's the idea. And giving people a scale, giving a corporate wellness program a scale.
Oh, that'd be great for that.
Giving a school system a scale. All of a sudden we say, if we give you that feedback and you can measure, you can see that over time you make changes. And that's an individual story, that not everybody's brain is the same. We've learned this with hundreds, if not thousands of people I've worked with. Everybody has a different baseline. Everybody has a different brainwave output, but everybody has effect over that. And some people who are very attentive and great at attention may have very low levels in the score of joy. Other people, very joyful, can't pay attention. We want to learn how to get more control over it. And a simple little headset like this and an iPad and the Wujitech Wuji Brainwave software is a way to do that. So if you're an individual, it's a really cool opportunity to track it for yourself or your family. If you're a big system, we have a school system in Hawaii with thousands of people, 10,000 students on the same system. So it's really a solution, I think, to bring the brain into close focus in healthcare.
It's fantastic. I think what you've got here, Francesco, is an approach that can be used on an individual level. It can be used on a corporate level. And what it can do is it can change your physiology. You can get rid of the headaches, or the backaches, or the ulcers, or the insomnia, as a tool to try and track over time how you're doing with these various different kinds of relaxation approaches. So I think you're onto something here, and I think that this is going to be, in part, the future of how we add a new technology to the practice of medicine.